I found my wife's secret savings account with $150, $0, and discovered she'd been secretly transferring it to her brother's shady business. But the real shock came when I found out she was planning to alter our will to leave everything to him. Now I'm fighting over our house and inheritance in court. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, honestly. I thought I knew everything about my wife. We'd been married for 7 years, and up until a few months ago, I believed we had a solid life, two decent jobs, a nice house, some savings, and a future we were building together. But then I started noticing little things: her phone ringing at odd hours, her being strangely secretive about her laptop, and her brushing off questions about her whereabouts like she was hiding something. At first, I just shrugged it off as work stress or her needing her space. But deep down, I felt a gnawing suspicion that something was off. Then came the day I stumbled across it. I was in the study, looking for some documents to send to our accountant when I noticed her laptop was left open. I casually glanced over and saw a bank statement pulled up on the screen. The account balance was more than I'd ever seen, around $150, $0, and there were regular transfers going out to a bank account I didn't recognize. My heart started pounding. I looked closer. The transfers were going directly to her brother, Jason, and to some shady business he'd been involved in, some import-export scheme that I'd never heard of but sounded sketchy as hell. I felt a cold sweat. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My wife was secretly funneling money to her brother, money we'd worked hard for, money I thought was safely tucked away. The thing is, she'd always been the kind of woman to hide her true intentions behind a pretty mask. She'd lie about her plans, about her spending, about her conversations. But this was beyond anything I'd imagined. And what's worse, I found out she was planning to change our will. I found drafts of a new one. She was going to leave everything to Jason. Our house, our savings, everything. I didn't know what to think at first. My mind was racing. I had no proof she was cheating on me physically, but this financial betrayal, it cut deep. I started piecing together everything: her late nights, her secret phone calls, her evasiveness when I asked about her brother. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I remember sitting there, staring at the screen, feeling this mix of rage, betrayal, and helplessness. How could she do this? How could she lie and cheat with money, and what was she planning to do next? I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew this was just the beginning of something much darker. The moment I decided to confront her, I knew I had to be careful. Is the kind of woman who can spin a web of lies so tight, you'd think she was a master illusionist. But I also knew I couldn't just accuse her without evidence. That night, I waited until she was in the bedroom, pretending to be asleep while I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing with everything I'd uncovered. I had to find the right way to approach this, to get her to crack. Finally, I decided to bring it up casually, like I was just curious. I started asking about her brother, how he was doing, what his latest schemes were, that kind of thing. She brushed it off with her usual bitchy attitude, rolling her eyes and saying, "Jason's fine, you don't need to worry about him." But I pressed a little, making her uncomfortable. That's when she snapped, saying I was just paranoid and that I was reading too much into her family's business. She called me insecure, said I was overthinking everything, and that I was just jealous of her relationship with her brother. But I wasn't buying it. I knew her too well. The way she lied so effortlessly, the way she dodged questions with a smirk, it was all too obvious. I pressed further, asking about the money transfers, about the will, about what she was planning. That's when she got defensive, her voice rising. "You're crazy," she spat. "You think I'd do something like that? You're just paranoid because you don't trust me. Maybe you should get a hobby instead of spying on me all the time." Her words stung, but I wasn't about to let her turn this into some petty fight. The thing is, her reaction only confirmed my suspicions. She was lying and she knew it. I could see it in her eyes, the way she hesitated, the way she tried to dismiss everything. I felt a surge of anger boil up inside me. How could she betray me like this? After all we'd been through. I'd always been the one working hard, making sacrifices, trusting her with everything, including my own money. And now I found out she'd been secretly funneling our savings to her shady brother, planning to leave me with nothing. The betrayal ran so deep I felt like I was drowning. That night I lay awake, replaying everything in my head. I kept thinking about the money, the will, and her lies. I felt so hurt, so angry, but mostly I felt betrayed. I realized I couldn't trust her anymore, not with my money, not with my heart. I started to think about what I needed to do next. I couldn't let her get away with this. I had to find a way to get proof, to protect myself and what was left of our life together. But I also knew this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about her cheating, her deception, and the fact that she was willing to destroy everything we built, just to serve her own interests. The next day, I started digging even deeper. I accessed the bank statements, tracked the transfers, and made copies of everything. I needed undeniable proof before I made my move. I also contacted a lawyer to understand my options. I knew that if she was planning to change the will, I had to act fast. I couldn't let her pull a fast one and leave me with nothing. The more I uncovered, the more my stomach turned. I was furious, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I knew I had to play this carefully, but I also knew I couldn't let her get away with it. Not without a fight. And so I began planning my next steps, knowing this was just the beginning of a war I wasn't prepared for but couldn't back down from. After I gathered enough evidence, copies of the bank statements, the drafts of her new will, and her secret transfer records, I knew I couldn't just sit on this anymore. I had to confront her in a way that would force her to reveal her hand. I decided to do it during dinner, thinking a calm setting might make her slip up or at least give me some clarity. I was furious, but I also wanted to see how far she was willing to go, how much she thought she could get away with. That night I cooked her favorite meal, trying to keep my composure. She came home looking bitchy as usual, her heels clicking loudly on the hardwood floor. She sat down at the table, smirking, acting like everything was fine. I kept my face neutral, but inside I was boiling. I took a deep breath and started casually. I've been doing some thinking about us, about our future, and I found some things that don't add up. Her eyes narrowed and she tried to brush it off. What are you talking about? She snapped. I pulled out the printed bank statements and slid them across the table. Her face flickered with surprise, then quickly turned defensive. That's nothing, she said, trying to dismiss it. You're reading too much into stuff. I transfer money to Jason all the time. It's nothing special. I pressed her further. Really? Because I saw the transfers, regular, large sums going directly to your brother's account. And I found drafts of a new will where you're planning to leave everything to Jason. Her face went pale for a split second, then she forced a laugh. Oh, come on, that's just a draft. I was thinking about it, but it's not serious. Her voice was shaky and she kept trying to deny, but I saw the cracks in her facade. I think you're lying, I said calmly but firmly. I also found out you've been secretly transferring money from our account. Over $150, $0. Do you want to tell me what's really going on? Her eyes darted around the room, her bitchy smirk replaced by a look of panic. She started to cry, but it was fake tears and I knew it. You don't understand, she mumbled. It's complicated. Jason's been in trouble and I was just trying to help him. It's not what you think. I felt my stomach turn. That was her classic excuse, playing the victim, twisting the story to make herself look innocent. But I wasn't buying it. I was livid. How could she lie so effortlessly? How could she betray me like this? She was trying to manipulate the situation, to spin it into me being the bad guy. But I had the proof, and I wasn't about to let her off the hook so easily. I told her I needed answers, that I was done with her lies. She kept crying, trying to blame everything on her brother, saying he was the mastermind and that she was just trying to help. But I knew better. I knew she was involved way more than she admitted. She was planning to leave me with nothing, our house, our savings, everything we built, just so she could help her brother get out of his mess and probably profit from it. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the betrayal, about how I had trusted her all these years. I felt like a fool, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I knew I had to act fast. I contacted my lawyer, told him everything, and started preparing for a fight. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Whatever she was planning, I was going to stop her. I could see now she was manipulative, selfish, and dangerous, and I had to protect myself and what was left of my dignity. The next morning, I woke up with a decision. I wasn't going to chase her or beg her to stay. I was done. I needed to get ahead of her plans to make sure she couldn't screw me over any further. The game was on, and I was determined to come out on top. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew one thing had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything she wanted. Not without a fight. Over the next few days, I threw myself into action. I made sure I had all the evidence organized, copies of the bank statements, the draft of her new will, the transfer records, and I met with my lawyer, Mark. He was sharp and straight to the point, which I appreciated. I told him everything about the secret account, the transfers to her brother, the plan to change the will, and her outright lies. His reaction was exactly what I needed. This is serious. If she's planning to manipulate the will and take everything, we need to act fast. I'll start by filing a legal injunction to freeze her accounts and prevent her from making any further changes to the will. That was when I realized just how deep the betrayal went. She'd been planning this for a while, probably since she saw the writing on the wall that I was catching on. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. Who always acted so bitchy and self-centered had been secretly plotting to take everything from me. Our house, our savings, our future. She'd lied so many times I'd lost count. And the worst part, she'd been convincing herself she was doing this for her brother, that she was somehow justified. But I knew the truth. She was just selfish, manipulative, and willing to do whatever it took to get what she wanted. While the legal preparations were, I started thinking about how to approach her again. I knew she was probably scheming more, trying to find a way around what I was doing. I also knew I had to be careful. She's the type to turn on the tears or throw a tantrum to get her way. So I decided to stay calm, act like I was letting her think she was winning, then strike. When she least expected it, I didn't want her to know I was one step ahead. One evening she came home early looking tense. Her bitchy smirk was gone, replaced by a nervous glint in her eyes. She tried to act normal, but I saw right through her. I waited until she sat down, then casually brought up the topic of her plans. I want to talk about this money situation. I know about the transfers, the will, everything. I'm not stupid. I know you're planning to screw me over. Her face twitched and she started to deny everything again. That was when I decided to be blunt. I've already spoken to my lawyer. We're filing for an injunction. You're not taking a penny more of my money or changing that will without my approval. Her eyes widened and she suddenly looked furious. You're crazy, she hissed. You're just jealous. You're trying to control everything. I do everything for us. Her voice cracked and she tried to fake tears, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her I was done playing her games, that I'd been patient long enough, but I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. The next day, Mark filed the paperwork. The court immediately granted the injunction, freezing her accounts and halting any changes to the will. I could feel a tiny sense of relief, but also a deep, simmering anger. I was furious she'd been lying and scheming behind my back for so long. I had trusted her, and she'd used that trust to manipulate me. I realized I'd been a fool to think she was just a bitchy wife. She was dangerous, willing to destroy everything for her own selfish gain. As I watched her reaction when she found out about the court order, I saw her panic. She tried to make herself look innocent, but it was too late. The damage was done. I had the proof, and I was prepared to fight her in court. Honestly, I didn't know what the final outcome would be, but I knew I had to stand my ground. I couldn't let her keep playing her manipulative games, not anymore. This was about more than money. It was about respect, trust, and protecting what's left of my life. And I was done being the victim of her lies. The court hearing came sooner than I expected. I went into that courtroom feeling a mix of exhaustion and determination. I had all my evidence laid out, printouts, bank statements, the draft of her will, and I was ready to fight for what was mine. Of course, showed up trying to look innocent, but her bitchy smirk was gone. She looked desperate, her eyes darting around as if she was trying to find a way out. Her lawyer tried to spin some story about how she was just being helpful to her brother and that the transfers were all innocent, but the judge wasn't buying it. When my lawyer, Mark, argued that was attempting to manipulate the estate and alter our will without my consent, her face turned red. She kept trying to interrupt to make a scene, but the judge cut her off. Ms. Johnson, The judge said sternly, "Your actions suggest a clear intent to defraud or manipulate the estate. The court is issuing a permanent injunction to prevent any further transfers or amendments to the will until further notice." Hearing that was a relief, but I also felt a strange emptiness. All this chaos, all this betrayal, it draining. I'd fought so hard just to keep what I thought was mine, and now I had to figure out what's next. Kept protesting, crying, and screaming about how I was ruining her life, but I knew she was only trying to save herself. Her lies had caught up with her, and now she was cornered. After the court session, I stayed outside, just breathing in the cold air. I felt a mixture of relief and anger. Relief because I had protected what was left, and anger because I'd been so blind for so long. How could I not see that she was capable of this level of deception? How could someone I loved, someone I trusted, try to cheat me out of everything? It was a brutal wake-up call. I realized I'd been a fool to ignore the signs, to think her bitchy attitude was just her personality, not a mask. That night, I sat alone in the house, reflecting on everything. I knew the fight wasn't over. She'd probably try to find a way around the court order, maybe get a new lawyer or find some loophole. But I also knew I'd done everything I could to protect myself. I'd exposed her lies, fought for my rights, and now I just had to wait and see what she'd do next. Deep down, I was angry, hurt, but also strangely relieved. I was finally free from her manipulations, and I was determined to rebuild my life without her. I kept wondering how I'd let things get this far, how I'd ignored the red flags, her bitchy attitude, her secretive nature, the lies about her family. But I also knew I'd learned from this. Trust is hard to rebuild after a betrayal like this, but I wasn't going to let her destroy me completely. I'd take what I needed from this nightmare and move forward. Because at the end of the day, I realized I deserved better than someone who could lie, cheat, and scheme behind my back. And I was finally starting to believe I'd get there. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. The court's injunction kept from touching any more of our money or changing the will, but I knew this wasn't the end. She was still out there, probably scheming, trying to find some way to turn things around. But I had learned my lesson. Trust, once broken, is almost impossible to fully repair. I became more cautious, more guarded. I hired a private investigator to keep an eye on her, just in case she tried to pull some stunt behind my back. Emotionally, I went from shock and rage to deep sadness, then finally to a kind of numb acceptance. I realized I'd spent so much time trying to fix what was broken that I'd forgotten how to protect myself. But now, I was more aware. I understood that betrayal isn't just about money. It's about the trust you place in someone you love and how quickly that can all shatter. Looking back, I can honestly say that I've learned some hard lessons. Never ignore the small signs of deception. Those little bitchy comments, the evasiveness, the secretive phone calls. They're often the warning signs of something worse. I also learned that when it comes to money, you have to be vigilant. People can be very good at hiding their true motives, especially when they think they won't get caught. And finally, I learned that revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about protecting yourself and your future. Today, I'm still healing. I've started seeing a therapist to work through the anger and betrayal. I'm slowly rebuilding my confidence and learning to trust again, but I'll never forget what happened. It's a scar that reminds me to be cautious and to value myself more. I don't regret fighting for what's right, even if it meant going through hell. Sometimes, you have to stand up and fight for your dignity, even if it costs you everything. My advice to anyone reading this, especially if you're in a similar situation, trust your instincts. If something feels off, dig deeper. Don't let anyone manipulate or lie to you just because you want to believe the best. Protect your money, your heart, and your future. Because, in the end, no amount of love is worth losing everything you've worked for. And if you find yourself betrayed, remember, you're stronger than you think and you can come out the other side.